Ladies and gentlemen, I am back with some more Marathon today, and I'm bringing you some footage from the weekend live stream on Twitch. This run featuring a buddy of mine, Brother Kalen. He's a Space Marine in another life, but he recently purchased the title, so we're both still trying to figure things out. We queued up as a duo with the crew fill option disabled, simply because in my experience, queuing up with randoms is often a mixed bag. I've had some good experiences, but I've had far more bad ones. A lot of people aren't using voice comms, and often they'll just run off into some random direction, shooting at everything in sight, giving away your position. If they don't match your playstyle, then more often than not, they can end up being a hindrance. A duo queue does seem to be a heavily requested feature for the game, although I don't know if Bungie has any plans to do so. The game didn't originally even feature a solo mode. It was designed for a team of 3, and in fact, it is still tuned for teams of 3, even in solo mode. So the difficulty does not scale. Bungie has stated that they prefer that you adapt to the difficulty and that the difficulty not adapt to you. So if you're still on the fence about this game, or you're coming from something like Arc Raiders, just know that Marathon is, in my opinion, far more challenging than a game like Arc and perhaps some other titles. And this is primarily because most of the units in this game are ground-based infantry units, and there are quite a few variants. Some are commanders, some have grenade launchers, some have assassin-like stealth abilities. You've got some aerial drones that will slow you down with their abilities, and so it can be difficult to fight a lot of these on your own, in particular because there are so many AI on the map that they're hard to avoid. For one thing, they're usually in and around high-value loot areas. Many of them will spawn in. There's lockdown events and different map conditions that can affect the amount of AI in an area. Some maps are just far more challenging than others, with varying degrees of difficulty when it comes to the unit type. And so, yeah, it's indeed challenging. You really need to pick your fights. You need to know when and when not to engage, because more often than not, if you are in a prolonged AI battle, people can hear you in the map. They're going to run towards gunfire, and you're getting third-partied. So, to that, I say, don't let the visuals fool you. It ends up being far more tactical than you think, and often simply relying on your reflexes isn't going to get the job done. Unless you're somebody like Shroud, of course, but since most of us aren't, we have to resort to a different set of tactics.
Follow the echoes.
But in this case, I activate my Echo Pulse as the recon shell. 2 threats detected. And at this point, Kalen had noticed that their movement seemed quite erratic. I agreed. These had to be players. Whether it's another duo or potentially a trio with one lagging behind, we set up for a fight. There's a contact.
Here.
Now, they have a high ground advantage, so I don't want to fire just yet. I most likely won't be able to finish them off. They'll probably just retreat and heal. So therefore, we need to wait until they can make some mistakes. Or at least until we can find a better position. And there's a couple of ladders that head up to the top and some stairways. But we're just holding. We've got a lot of time, 20 minutes left. Shots fired.
20 minutes remain.
Are they fighting another team? Are they fighting bots? Time to relocate and find out. Kalen ends up holding a stairway to the right as I peek my way up the ladder and become a tad concerned with some of the other entryways here. But we're still holding, especially because I have weapons that are designed a bit more for range, both semi-automatic I think Kalen had one of the Volt guns. I'm not sure if it was an SMG or an AR, but he's got more full auto close quarters potential. However, if you look now, top right, there was somebody moving
This
up
good for you?
above that I'm only noticing at this moment. I'm not sure I saw it when I was actually playing. I'm gonna shut up and let this play out.
Grab all you can.
Check it out.
Seek her out. Runner threat detected.
One runner eliminated who was trying to creep up on Kalen. However, his friends can still potentially reboot him, assuming they get to his pack in time. I'm still holding this left side, hearing doors causing me to fall back.
See what I'm seeing?
One runner decides to open up a door, but they never came out, so I had a feeling they had potentially seen me briefly. So I just tried to hold my position. And I'm so used to playing Arc Raiders, which is third person, that my tactics usually involve me constantly moving around and changing positions because you can obviously third person peek, which makes a lot of my traditional tactics useless. So in this case, you can hold an angle, old school. Granted, this can of course lead to a little bit more camping, but that's the way of things.
Over here.
Kalen downing a runner up top. And I got an assist for that. I'm assuming it's one of the runners that I shot at earlier. My spider drone is available with 11 seconds on Echo Pulse.
Prepare for increased hostile action.
UESC reinforcements are inbound, so things might get a little tricky here.
Marking targets.
I activate Echo Pulse to try to find the third, but 0 threats currently detected. It might have been a duo. At least that's what we're thinking at the moment. 1 threat detected. Is it another player or a
Need
bot?
eyes
And
on.
it looks like it's a bot. I start opening fire because we're going to have to deal with a whole bunch more. At some point, I figure, what the hell? Let's light them up. Kalen going in for the loot. And I follow up, searching for some scraps, finding some weapons that I don't end up using. I'm not really an LMG kind of guy, but I'll take what I can get. We were also here to complete a contract where we needed to loot these rods. We needed 2. I don't think I ended up finding both, especially since we got caught up with PvP. I remember watching Kalen crouch walking constantly and thinking maybe
Danger
you should
spotted.
try a different shell because Vandal is all about high speed mobility. And so therefore she doesn't necessarily synergize well with other shells, and while she is a great flanker and deathmatcher, I don't know if she adds much to a party, especially if you like to move slow.
Connection collapse in 15 minutes.
In that shape. Wait a second.
Now, during this battle, I remember thinking that we've been here far too long. the entire map potentially knows that we're in this building. You'll notice that this repeater reloads one bullet at a time, and I found that to be somewhat annoying because I don't think the gun does so much damage that it's worth such a slow reload, and so therefore I don't know that it's necessarily going to be a favorite weapon of mine going forward. However, by this point, my vault or stash is so full that I was just trying to go through extra weapons. We clean up another bot and continue to creep around simply because we're focused on finding these objective components. However, not much luck. But again, this whole time I'm thinking, we've overstayed our welcome. We really need to scoot. But we stuck it out. We didn't hear any other gunfire during the match. And normally you can hear people fighting across the map. And so therefore, we weren't necessarily too concerned. Of course, that doesn't prevent an assassin from creeping up on you and ruining your day. There's also, of course, the Rook shell, which is a solo-only shell that does get placed into team games. It cannot see solo raids, but it will show up in your 3 team member matches, and so therefore you need to be on the lookout for them because they are similar to a Tarkov Scav player where they go in with randomized loot, and so you don't really have anything to lose. So you can go in and terrorize an entire team because the TTK is low enough to be able to succeed against 3 players as long as you've got the skills to back it up. Popping another Echo Pulse, you can see that there are 0 threats detected, and so we were a little bit more confident in our abilities to loot without interruption. Although it really wouldn't take that long for somebody to show up after your Echo Pulse, which has a lengthy cooldown unless you've got mods that affect it. And while the maps are large, they're not so large that you can't traverse them in a decent amount of time and get to somebody's location.
Prepare for increased hostile action.
Granted, this just felt like a very quiet raid within Dire Marsh, which I don't think is the most popular map, and I believe the day that this was played is the day that the Outpost map released, which is a very small vertical map that has a lot of action and high quality loot. So I think a lot of people were probably queuing up for that map instead of the original ones, but I can't be sure.
Find them.
A few more bots making their way toward us, and these bots weren't too bad. I've seen far worse. They didn't really seem to send any heavier units. It was mostly the basic infantry models and a couple of stealthers. I'm not exactly sure what they're called yet, but it seemed like we were getting pretty lucky. If you listen, you can actually hear some gunfire in the distance, and when you hear that, it usually means that there are players still on the map. I don't know that the bots have anything else to shoot at. Maybe they shoot at some of the ticks, but beyond that, I think that they only fire upon players. So usually if you hear that distant gunfire, it's a sign of player threats. Marathon has been an interesting experience.
You have 10 minutes to exfil.
It's been met with the usual new game hostility. Lots of people that potentially favor other titles, especially Arc Raiders, are seemingly against this game having any form of success, which is unfortunate because it's not a bad game. It's not High Guard, it's not Concord. It's got a lot of potential. There's room for this title to exist within the extraction shooter genre. It's not perfect, but what is. I don't even think Arc Raiders is perfect. I have enjoyed that game thoroughly and plan to continue, but I think even that game has room for improvement. And by the way, full disclosure, as always, I have not been sponsored to play or cover this game in any capacity. I bought it with my own money, simply because I was interested in it. Granted, even if I was sponsored, you'd still get the unvarnished truth, and hopefully that's something that you can always keep in mind when you visit the channel. Sadly, these days it's sometimes hard to tell what motivates one to cover something. With that said, time will always tell. Sometimes I'll love a game at the beginning, the new game smell, it's fresh, exciting. A month later, people have figured out the meta, they're geared out, they've got more time to play than me. I'm just not able to carry my own, and I perhaps don't like the game as much as I once did.
Over here.
It's happened plenty of times in the past and will probably continue to happen throughout the course of my gaming career. Which is why, even though there are cons to playing a game at release, often it's also the best time to play because everybody on the planet is new. And so you are on even footing. Now, this game will feature wipes every 3 months. And that's going to help significantly regarding the balance of power. If somebody comes into this game after the first 3 months or maybe after 6 months, they're not going to be out-geared. They're going to have a better chance at surviving against players because everybody's been reset. With that said, there are people that are fully decked out after 24 hours of playing this game.
Exit moves ended.
Game developers often underestimate how much free time some people have, especially content creators who play these games sometimes what feels like 24/7.
Seeker out.
More robot friends, and somebody just activated the Exfil. I'm pushing up to investigate. Contact.
Runner here.
I get one shot in. Kaylin has a good high ground position and finishes them off. Looks like they were solo because we didn't end up finding anybody else. Although we are still dealing with a robotic threat, we do have to be very careful at this period of time because once the Exfil site has been activated, it emits a bright blue beam into the sky, letting everybody on the map know that you're trying to bail. I heard the Exfil make some noise and started to become a little bit paranoid that somebody else might be trying to bail because if they do take it, we have to find another way home. Kaylin's still dealing with some of the bots.
Shield's gone.
Find them.
I was somewhat concerned with other players showing up.
Danger. Danger.
I believe I suggested that we hightail it since this thing was activated. Everybody and their mother knows that we're trying to bail. I decide to check out this player's loot. Upon closer inspection, we see that it's a Rook. So they came into this raid solo. The nice thing about the Rook shell is that they cannot do contracts. So no missions or quests for them. They are a scavenger unit. They're only here for the loot. So you won't have to worry about shooting a player in this game who's just trying to finish their quest. I'm air quoting right now.
5 minutes remain.
Anyways, even though we didn't get to complete the contract, we still had a blast. I think it was a good PvP encounter, tactically sound. We weren't in too much danger just because of some solid positioning. Overall, in my opinion, a good game. Run complete, and a black screen without a spectator cam usually means that nobody was left on the map. So we could have stayed a little longer, but since the extract was activated, we decided to call it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about Marathon. Have you been playing it yourself? Are you still holding out? Feel free to comment below, and I'll see you on the next one.